This is your first appearance before the committee since this is not a Senate-confirmed position. So I'd like to ask you a couple basic questions that nominees for the committee always get asked. I assume you would agree that it's important for you and executive branch officials to be responsive to requests from Congress for information?
Yes, sir.
And I would assume that you also agree that it's important for you and executive branch officials to be responsive to requests from the public if information is requested properly under the Freedom of Information Act. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Well, the reason I ask is that because at the beginning of the pandemic, Congress passed the CARES Act, the first major coronavirus response bill, which gave temporary authority to the Bureau of Prisons to allow some inmates to serve out part of their sentences at home until the pandemic ended, or until the availability of vaccines meant that prisoners could again be housed in a secure location. But jailbreak activists, to include so-called progressive criminal justice reformers, asked the Biden administration to twist the law and have the Bureau use the pandemic as an excuse to release as many inmates as possible and never return them to prison and to finish their sentences after the pandemic ended. I know that this was before you started, but it was publicly reported that those jailbreak activists asked the Department of Justice to rewrite the law to achieve their soft-on-crime goals. Now, the department is proposing a new rule that would give the Bureau of Prisons authority to release tens of thousands of additional criminals and not require them to serve their sentences. This would not only be an enormous mistake in the middle of a crime wave, it would also be illegal. In January, I sent Attorney General Merrick Garland a letter to provide the exact same information that he would be required by law to provide any interested member of the public. That is, written copies of communications and meeting records between the Biden administration and these jailbreak activists where they discuss policy. This week, more than 8 months later, one of the Attorney General's underlings finally sent a cursory response providing exactly none of that information. I say this simply as a cautionary tale. I hope that you will be more responsive than the Attorney General, who has politicized the department, who seems unable to stand up to far left-wing activists in his own department and to enforce the law neutrally, at the same time that he sicks the feds on parents at school boards or send armed agents into a Catholic minister's home, a man named Matt Hoke, when he had agreed already to cooperate with any investigation into his supposed crimes. Now, the Attorney General is going to have a reckoning whenever he faces a Republican Congress in January. I hope, though, that you will simply cooperate with timely requests for information from members of Congress and from the public. Now, Ms. Peters, on a related point, I want to note that the President said just a couple weeks ago, the pandemic is over. Is President Biden wrong?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the cautionary tale about being responsive. We certainly want to be as responsive as we can at the Bureau of Prisons to both members of Congress requests and also that of the general public. As we pivot out of the pandemic and really focus on kind of a future state as it relates to the pandemic, we do have that rule under review that will give the Bureau guidance on those individuals that were released on home care confinement. We're hoping to see what that rule looks like here in the coming weeks, and I look forward to reviewing it when it's finalized.
So, Ms. Peters, is the President wrong? Is the pandemic over or not over?
Senator, I am not a health professional. I would not be able to make that
determination. But it's part of your job as the director of the bureaus to ensure that our prisons can adapt to pandemic conditions. Do you know how many criminals are currently serving their sentence at home who should be in the prison?
I don't have that number in front of me, Senator.
It's over 11,000. That includes 647 gun criminals, bomb makers, and other weapons criminals. 13 murderers. 5,870 drug traffickers. Are you certain that not a single one of those criminals who are serving their sentence at home are currently engaged in criminal activity?
Thank you, Senator. I could never make that certain determination.
I don't think anyone could. In fact, I'm pretty certain that at least one of them is, probably a lot of them.